check that that's working. Yeah, there we go. Is our lovely Jules. She's a home group member of Shivering Beginners. We met before that. Oh, she's just a shining star in this fellowship, and I can't, she shared for us at Steps, and she was one of the first people that I wanted to ask come and share for us. So over to you, Jules. We can't wait to hear you. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah. My name is Jules, and I am an alcoholic. I'm so honored to speak. Thank you very much for asking me to share my experience, strength, and hope. I got sober a little over 31 years ago, and who would have thunk when I walked into AA that a young woman, 28 years old, who was suicidal, who had no value, who could never even comprehend that anything I would say or anything about me would be able to help someone. So my deepest wish today is that someone relates to what I share, a feeling. It's not going to be the exact same shenanigans, but one of my favorite things about the fellowship is that we all feel pretty much the same, and we have a solution. You know what? I did not want to grow up to be an alcoholic. I don't know about you guys, but that's the home I grew up in. And I thought it was a moral issue. I thought you could control it. And when I was a child at New Year's in the States, they would give you a little sip of champagne in New Year's. And I thought, why are these people drinking this? Because I thought it tasted yucky. It was not, oh, the clouds parted and the sun shone, and I found my solution. That was not it for me. But because my house was pretty abusive, and I need to tell you that I did not even acknowledge that I had been abused until I was 3 years sober. It's horrific to have to admit that your core relationship, your mother, wants to kill you. And that's what I had to admit when I was 3 years sober. And a friend of mine, black belt in Al-Anon, had to comfort and soothe and encourage me to get to that admission, because until I could get to that admission, I couldn't get past it. I was raised to be respectful to my elders. And, my mom did a good job. I had morals and values, and I respected people. But she also, for some reason, I was the punching bag. I have an older sister, a year and a month older. Most of you have probably never heard me talk about my sister, and there's a reason for that. I believe that my sister was their love child. I mean, look, I grew up thinking if I could just figure out why, I'd be okay, because I was always trying to understand, why am I not lovable? Why am I being treated the way I am? Because one of my skills to survive was being an observer. I had to be an observer to survive. And I would see that my sister wasn't being treated the same way. And so I thought, okay, she's their love child, and I'm the child that was going to save the marriage. And guess what? It didn't work. So I was kind of the punching bag, and that's okay. But when you're a little baby, you don't know that, When I was about 13, I started experimenting with alcohol, and that's when it worked. The very first time, it worked perfectly. And I chased that from 13 until 28. And the only time it ever gave me any relief was when I drank to blackout. I didn't know that that was my goal. Every time I drank was to drink to blackout, but that's exactly what I did. All the people I hung out with drank exactly the same way. So I thought, well, I'm not an alcoholic, because I get up and I go, well, at working age, I get up and I go to work and I pay my bills and I pay my rent and I'm not homeless and I haven't gotten a DUI. I went through the yes constantly. I went through the, gee, how am I gonna drink today to not get that blackout or not get that hangover? And all my friends and I, that was the main topic of our conversation, was how can we drink to excess and achieve perfection? I don't think normal people think about that, but that's what we did. So you know, I didn't have a support and love in my background. And I think the reason why I survived my childhood is because I had a grandparents who loved me unconditionally. And when I was 19, my grandma said, I know exactly what's been going on in your house, and all I can do is love you. And you know what? When you're 19 years old, and that's the first time that anyone validates that they see what's been happening, that's an awful long time. I was very grateful I had them in my life. My grandma died at 19. My mother rejected me one more time. And so the alcohol stopped working years and years before. So I thought suicide was a valid option. I had drank all the booze in the house. I was a lazy drunk. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that. I did a lot of mixing other forms of alcohol, trying to find that mix that would just get me to nirvana. It didn't work. So I was a lazy drunk, and I drank all the booze I had in the house, and I had a bottle of pills, and I swallowed those pills, and I went to sleep hoping I would never wake up again, because I just could not face life on life's terms. I had no tools to learn how to live life. I had no support. I woke up the next morning and I was pissed. I was so angry, and I was deaf. I have a partial hearing loss today because of that. And that's part of the wreckage of my past. And I accept it. I called my mom because I kept going back. I'm a trier. I tried really, really hard. And I kept going back to her thinking, oh, she's giving me glimpses that she's a mommy. And you know what? She wasn't. She just didn't have that in her. I didn't know that until many years later. And I called her up and I said, I tried to kill myself and I need your help. And she said, I can't help you. And she hung up the phone. So I went to the emergency room because I was deaf and I was scared. And when you tell them at the hospital that you try to kill yourself, and I'm really being tongue in cheek, but it was deadly serious to me at the time. But when I went to the hospital and I told them that I had tried to kill myself, they don't like that. They don't say, oh, there, it's okay. Here's a couple of tools and off you go. No, they put you on a 72-hour watch. And that scared me to death because I knew there was something very, very wrong, but I had no clue it was alcohol. They did give me some tools. In the States, we have a show called Saturday Night Live, and there was a character by this actor named Al Franken, and he used to stand in front of the mirror and he would say, you're worthy, you're pretty, you're handsome, you're smart enough, you're good enough, you know, and those were basically the tools the hospital gave me. So I took those tools and I was off and I tried to use them to the best of my ability. And at 25 years old, after trying to mix additional forms of alcohol and switching from scotch to brandy and drinking only top shelf liquor, or drinking only winery wines, because God knows I wasn't going to drink Gallo, which is a really crappy quality of wine here in the States. And I wasn't going to drink, I don't know, whatever lower form of hard alcohol. So if I drank the good stuff, I wasn't a drunk. And so at 25, again, all of my tricks stopped working. Suicide became an option. I did my second suicide attempt at 25 and I learned better this time. I didn't tell anybody. And I dug myself out of that hole, and it was a deep hole. It was very hard to get out of. I had no value, no self-worth. No one else looked like they understood how I felt. Went off my merry little way again because, again, I'm a trier. And at 28, one of the things I was trying to do is, if you guys liked me, I'd be okay. If I could find a him that would love me, I'd be okay. Because I was always seeking my family's love. Or I'd take out the credit cards and buy something bright and shiny, and that would make me feel good for a minute. So at 28, I was on the verge of my third suicide attempt. For some reason, I turned right. And what happened, I worked with a woman who was in NA and a woman who was in AA. And for years, we had been talking about our lives. And I'd tell them we have these divey bars by me. Anybody else go to divey bars? I did. And one of them was called the Saddle Rack, and it was a cowboy bar, and that was my cowboy phase. And I'd ride the mechanical bull, and they had a barbershop chair, and you'd sit in it, they'd lean you back and pour tequila down your throat, and I loved that place. blackout after blackout happened there. I found many Mr. Rights there. No, I'm not an easy woman, but when I was drinking, I did things that were demoralizing and degrading. So the Saddle Rack was one of my last watering holes. Another one was a place called St. James Infirmary. And I would tell these women in NA and NAA what I would do the night before. And then they would say, well, we went to a meeting and we talked about step 6, and then we learned about this, and then God's going to help me do that. And I think, oh my God, I feel so bad for you that you have to go to those AA meetings. Your poor lives. And I talk about, yeah, I blacked out here and I met so-and-so and I don't know where I woke up, and they just loved me. They never, ever, ever shoved this in my face. And I'm so grateful because I needed to get to myself. So at 28 years old, instead of attempting suicide for the 3rd time because I was a failure at that, I didn't need anything else to remind me how much of a failure I was. I reached out to the woman in NA and I said, I'm desperate. Please help me. And she suggested I go to an employee assistance program at work. And she knew they were going to give me those 20 questions. I didn't. They gave me those 20 questions. I got an A on that test. And they said, well, you know, we think you're super duper depressed, but we also think you're an alcoholic. And I said, but I can't be an alcoholic. I get up and I go to work and I pay my bills. And yes, I moved 13 times in 1 year, but who doesn't? Yes, I dated a professional gambler and all we did was coke and travel around the country, but who doesn't do that? You know, yes, I met Mr. Right here and there. I mean, just on and on and on, you know, and they just looked at me like a dog looks at you, kind of quizzically. And I thought, how come they're not responding the way I think they should? You know, and I was desperate. So they said, but we have a solution. We can send you to AA and we can put you in rehab. And the next thing that kicked in was I thought, oh, thank God. I'm so tired. I don't know about you guys. I think I've heard from a few of you. It's exhausting the way we live. It's exhausting carrying the world on our back and fighting everything and everyone. And that's all I did. So because I was desperate, because I was willing, I went to their rehab. Initially, I was like, oh, I just had a couple of bad moments, and they all laughed and laughed. And then a miracle happened. And I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, and the people started talking about how I felt. They didn't do the exact same things, but I knew that I wasn't alone for the first time in my life. I was 28 years old, and I felt like I had been a nomad wandering the earth, and no one else could understand how I felt. And the next thing they said is, but we have a solution. Welcome. We care. We're happy, joyous, and free. If you want what we have, do what we do. And I was so desperate and so willing, I believed every single thing they said. And I'm so grateful that I was. I would have been a lemming going right off that cliff. I would have done anything you guys said. Another miracle happened. 17 days after I got sober, God sent me a hymn. And I thought, oh God, this is the greatest. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. That was my reward for living such a life of woe. Now, if you haven't gotten it yet, I was a victim. I didn't know that. It's not a very attractive quality. It was all I knew, and I had valid reason to be a victim. Oh, gosh. That poor young woman, you know, I used to think that my heart cringed thinking about her, but you know what? My heart is melting when I think about her because she didn't know what she didn't know. That's me. I'm talking about, you know, I was always a good person. I was always who I am inside, but fear and anger and lack of whatever life gives to other people that I didn't get to experience was suppressing who I really am. So I did everything that was suggested, but I also did a couple other little things that I'm not proud of. We were talking a little bit before the meeting. I was so angry when I got here. You know, they talk about picking up the tools and using those tools to help us stay sober. And, you know, when you first get here, it's not like we all know what those tools are. We have to learn what those tools are, right? Well, I was pretty angry and I was pretty fearful. And I was raised in a house where if you showed any emotion, you were weak. So I hid it all. And I acted inappropriately. I did not know how to be a worker among workers. So I lied on my time card at that job that gave me the employee assistance rehab program. And I did that for the first 3 years of my sobriety, and I justified it all the way down the line. I practiced principles in every other area of my life, and for some reason, I justified that improper action. At 3 years sober, in early recovery, they said, guess what? That relationship is not going to work with him, that miracle that God sent you. And I said, oh, you guys don't know it's true love. They said, yeah, the odds are against you. And besides, 1 in 3 of you are probably going to stay sober. And I thought, I'm going to show you. So sometimes I used my anger for good. You know, sometimes I used it to help me. I'm not going to drink at you, or my fear. Well, if I don't do this and that and the other, then I'm going to get struck drunk. So I learned how to use those two emotions for good. And I did stay sober. At 3 years, I got fired from that job. At 3 years, that perfect man decided he didn't love me anymore. And that was the start of my ugly cry. Was a very attractive, sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I did was what I was taught. I went to meetings, I cried. I met with my sponsor and I cried. I worked with my sponsees and I cried. I did my service physicians and I cried, but I learned how to feel. I learned how to drink, not drink, no matter what. In the very beginning, they taught me we don't take anything no matter what. And I learned better. Because after that relationship ended and after I got fired, about year 4, I had a very, very, very deep depression. I lost the conception of God that I was given by this program. I hadn't heard very many people talk about, oh, we'll give you a God and then it might just go away someday. I'd never heard anybody talk about that. And it was happening to me and it scared me to death. I shared that secret because that's what we're taught here, to share the secret. And I shared that secret at this huge Sunday morning meeting that we used to have in real life here. And members in the fellowship came up to me and said, I know you don't feel like there's a God in your life right now, but I know there is. Even if you can't feel it, I promise you, they have not left you. Please believe that I believe for you. And I'm going to tell you from year 4 until about year 9, that's what I lived on, is your belief in a power greater than myself. Because I could not feel it. And I couldn't feel it because I was angry. And I couldn't feel it because I was fearful. I finally sought outside help. That's why I say I don't drink no matter what. I don't say we don't take anything no matter what, because we are not doctors. And I've seen too many people die because they've been judged. It's not my place to judge anyone. I came out of that depression at year 9, and my sponsor taught me, if you're not happy with your life, then you better do something about it. You know, I had tough sponsors. I had sponsors that said, get in the car and go to the meeting. You can't say no. I give you an assignment and you do it. And I'm grateful. I was always kind of a responsible person, even when I first got sober, but I needed that kind of hard line. This is how we work in AA. I didn't have any clue that I could say, nah, I don't feel like doing that step. So I never said no. I did not do anything perfectly, but I did my very best. And when I learned better, I started doing better. At year 9, when I came out of that depression and my sponsor's words of, you're not happy with your life, then what are you going to do about it? So what I decided to do was a good geographic. And, you know, I know it was a geographic now, but I was running towards something. I decided to sell everything I owned and I moved to Dublin, Ireland, because I had gone on a holiday there and I fell in love with the country. I grew up in a little town just north of me on the coast here in Northern California called Pacifica. And believe it or not, it's very similar to Dublin, Ireland. And when I went on a holiday there, I fell in love with it. And I fell in love with the culture and the history and the architecture. And I thought, I need a catalyst to change my life. So I took that catalyst. I had no job. I had no place to live. And I knew no one. But I went over there believing that no matter what, if I did the footwork, I could make a new life for myself. And that's exactly what I did. a miracle happened and I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous all over again at 10 years sober. What a gift to come out of such a deep depression, to be a little jaded by you guys, because we're all human beings and we accidentally hurt each other and make each other angry, me included. But I was a sensitive alcoholic and I let you hurt me. I also kept going back to that dry family well, because I had heard about, well, we've repaired our family relationships and everything is wonderful. And these people had been stealing from their families and they had done terrible things. And all I had ever wanted from my family was for them to love me. And my sponsor said, remember when you were little and you were taught actions speak louder than words? Your family has been screaming at you what they think of you. And you keep saying, yeah, but. So finally, when I moved abroad, that was one little piece where I let go of my family. I hit Dublin, Ireland on December 15th, 1999. It was the millennium. My job started in January of 2000. So I went down to Waterford. I had met some people in AA. And in the States here, we do everything. We always have a party. And for anything, you know, any excuse to eat, because we replace booze with food, you know, or doing adrenaline-based things or whatever. So I went down to Waterford and I said to the folks in AA, I said, hey, what are you guys doing on New Year's? It's a millennium. And they go, oh, nothing. And I said, oh, come on. I wasn't a rude, brash American, but I was naive. And I said, well, do you guys mind if I do something, you know, organize something? So what I did was somehow I got a church hall. I got somebody who had a boombox music thing. I got somebody to make sandwiches and I organized a meeting. And we had an AA meeting and we held hands and did the Lord's Prayer. And the fireworks were going off on the quay. And at midnight, we all held hands and we sang John Lennon's Imagine. And I thought, that's the life I want. I want the world to be like this. And I can make it. 21 years later, I can still make the world that way if I want it. And no, I don't have unicorns and rainbows in my imaginary world, but I choose to live positively today. A wonderful, beautiful sponsee that happens to be on this call that I get to go visit in August, Helen from Scotland, reminded me, find the awe in every day. And that's what I try to do in my sobriety. So I made a life in Dublin. Then something happened. Apparently, I scared them. I had no clue. I just thought, because really, I'm a respectful person and I'm very shy. You guys may go, oh, come on. I swear to God, I'm very, very, very shy. I put on these cloaks of, you know, AA secretary or AA timekeeper or whatever, but I'm very shy. And so I went over there and I thought, well, I'll just do what I was taught here and I'll just get involved in service and I'll, you know, volunteer and go to meetings and, you know, rebuild my life. And that's what I did. But then they're like, well, you're 10 years sober and you're 38 years old and you're a single woman and you're moving from California. What are you hiding? You're hiding something. And I had no clue they were thinking that. And so, and believe me, I'm going to tell you, my Irish friends told me that. So I'm not dissing them at all because I love the Irish. But anyway, so I was desperately lonely. And ladies, we all know how fabulous it is to have our lady friends and sit down and have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just have a female conversation. And that was not happening for me. So what I would do is I would walk the streets of Dublin and I would look at the architecture and I would try to look like I knew what I was doing because, you know, it's a tough town sometimes. And I was lonely and I built the relationship with God that I probably could have built better those prior 10 years, but it took what it took. And so I really learned who my higher power was. And one day I went on a retreat to a little town called Navan. And I was in a meditation, and I've been pretty crap with group meditations because I always hear somebody moving or, you know, clearing their throat or whatever, and I always try to get into it, and I usually couldn't. And so there was this big group meditation, and the moderator on the recording led us through on the meditation of remove every single thing from you. your clothing, your hair, your house, your belongings, your political beliefs, your memories, your feet, everything. Remove every single thing from you. And for some reason, 11 and a half years sober, I went with it. And what we were left with was our essence. And I came out of that retreat loving my essence. First time in my life where I loved who I was. And it didn't matter if you did. That is huge. On that retreat, I got my first best girlfriend in Dublin, Ireland. And she saved my life and I saved hers. Eventually, I did have to move back to the States because of 9/11. But I remember when her name is Maria. When Maria brought me to Dublin Airport to send me back to the States, she's Irish, and she said, "Don't leave me here with these people." And I thought, Maria, you're Irish, you know? But that's what our connection was. I'm really hoping in August that I get to reconnect with her. We'll see. It depends on what happens with COVID. During that time, I lived in Dublin. I also learned how to have a relationship with someone by not giving my body to them first. I debated whether or not I was going to share this part, but what happened was I met someone in the fellowship, and he was, I don't know, 6 years, 7 years longer sober than I. We were in service at a meeting, and all of a sudden one day after the meeting, he and I was a smoker in those days, and he and I were talking after the meeting, and he said, you know, I wanted to talk to you. I'm interested in dating you. And I was like, oh my God, this is what grown-ups do. You don't just go to the bar and meet somebody and then jump in bed, or you just don't go to AA meetings and meet somebody and jump in bed, right? And I thought, oh, this is interesting. Okay, let's see how this goes. And so we talked about how two adults, two whole people, get to know each other and move forward and have a mature, healthy relationship. So I thought, oh, this is good. So we did that for several months. And then one day, he said, hey, my daughter is going out of town, and do you want to spend the weekend? And I was smoking. And he wasn't a smoker, so I was standing in his patio looking at him in his dining room or whatever in the house. And he's like, hey, do you want to spend the weekend? And I was like, you know, turning bright red. Oh, I couldn't, like I was a virgin. Oh, I couldn't possibly spend the weekend with you, because I was thinking, gosh, he hasn't even held my hand. He hasn't even kissed me. He hasn't courted me, you know? And I recognized both those things at once. And I was able to say that to him in a kind, loving way, because that's how I roll. And apparently that embarrassed him. And I was stupid. And I thought we'd still move forward. And instead, what happened is at meeting level, he started talking about me. And my Irish friends will tell me they have a knack for talking about you in front of you. And you don't know they're talking about you. But they told me that secret. And I learned he was talking about me at meeting level. And I was shocked, because I thought, how could you do that? You know, how could you? It didn't matter. So I called him aside. And I said, with all due honesty and respect, I said, his name was Tommy the chef. And I said, Tommy, I just wanted to say that I really appreciated you doing what you did. I mean this deeply, respectfully. I'm so glad you did, because it taught me that I didn't have to give you my body for you to like me. That was huge. He didn't get it. He sent me a text after saying, you better, well, I have to tell you, I had a boyfriend once tell me, you're too cerebral. And I said to him, well, I'm an open book and you're illiterate. It just kind of popped out. I didn't mean it in a bad way. No offense, gentlemen, because it can happen with both, you know, male to female and female to male, or female to female and male to male. But anyway, so I was very grateful that Tommy did that. But he sent me a text after and he threatened me. And he said, you better watch your back. And I told my friend Maria, and she got her Irish up, and she's, you know, she was ready to fight for me. And I said, you know what, let's just let it go. And then a couple weeks later, the car that a very dear friend of mine was kind enough to give me for me to drive around in for a couple months when I lived in Dublin, because I walked most of the time, it got burned out. They burn out cars in Dublin. And that shocked me. And that's not why I left. I left because 9/11 happened and I couldn't retain my work permit. I knocked on every door. Couldn't get a job. I don't know how it was here in the States, but there they became part of the EU in January of 2002. The laws changed for people coming into the country. The fact that 9/11 happened changed a lot of people right away. And so I had to accept the consequences of my actions. I have to tell you, I have worked the steps multiple times, and I have learned how to be responsible for my actions, for my choices. They have not always been the best. I don't think most of us get up every day and think, gosh, how am I going to make a crappy decision today? I think most of the time we get up thinking, that's a pretty good idea. And then we're like, maybe I could learn better next time, you know? But anyway, I had to accept that, you know what? I had a grand adventure. I met some fabulous people. I learned my value. I learned so much inner fortitude, and I'm going to accept what happened in the world. I moved back to California, and I'm going to tell you, my family still had the power, because I gave it to them, to hurt my feelings. So I was too afraid to tell them I was back in the States. It took me several months to tell them. And when I did, it didn't matter that I was there. But I kept trying, because I don't know if this is really an Irish saying, but my Irish friends said, God loves a trier, and that was me. So I kept trying to have a relationship with my family, and they kept saying, rejection, rejection, rejection. I wrote my sister a letter, who lives an hour north of me. I wrote her a letter because my family likes to play this game where if you call them on the phone and they don't like what you have to say, they'll hang up on you. And so I chose not to be hung up on, and so I wrote a letter. And I called her up and I said, did you get the letter? And in it, I wrote very compassionately and honestly and vulnerably, I would like a closer relationship with you. I'm willing to go to any lengths. I'll drive up to where you live. You can come down to where I live. I just long to have a relationship with you. And I called her to see if she got the letter, and she said, yes, I did. And I said, well, what do you think? And she said, you want something that's never going to happen. And so what I learned, unfortunately for you, you guys are my family. And I am so blessed. It's okay. You know, I've talked to people who've had family members who can't, they're like mine, and they're like, oh, you poor thing. And I'm like, no, how lucky am I that I get to have a chosen family? And I choose my family wisely these days. I'm so lucky. I feel no victimization, no less than, no want. You know, I kept trying. And my sponsor had to tell me, I never had human children. I've always had furry children. And I kept trying to have a relationship. And my sponsor finally said to me, you'd never treat your babies the way you let your mom treat you. And that's true. And so I finally had to let go of that. And I called her up one day because I wanted one last try. And I said, I really want to have a relationship with you. And she hung up the phone. And I kept calling back because I kept thinking, this just can't be true. It's 2008. We're grown-ups, you know, we've had a relationship. And I left message after message. And finally, the last message was, I don't understand why it's okay for you to have one daughter. And I walked away. And I had thought for many years, I wonder how she is. I hope she's okay. I had done the resentment prayer. I had let go of all the hurt and all the pain, but I still cared. You know, I still wondered if she was okay, but I knew I couldn't keep hurting myself. So one day I had met someone early on when I first got back to the States, and we were in a relationship, and we were planning a trip to Europe, and we were very excited about that. And my cousin who lives in Colorado, not my sister who lives an hour north of me, but my cousin called me and said, well, I just wanted to let you know that the family took a vote. I do not belong to the mafia, but the family took a vote and said that we are going to tell you this. Your mom had stage 4 lung cancer for 9 months, and she told everyone in the family not to tell you. And now she's dead. And I said, oh, I'm really grateful you told me, because I often wondered if she was okay. But you know what I didn't do? I didn't own it. It was not my decision for that to be. My decision was to not be put into a manipulative, disrespectful, hurtful relationship. And all I felt at that moment was compassion for her and a bit of sadness that she was so angry. But that was her decision. And I stayed on my side of the street. They said they wanted me to go to the service. And I didn't want to go because I was still afraid, because they could still hurt me. And I had a friend here say, I want you to go to that service, and I want you to show the grace and dignity that you've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was the reason why I went. I did not go to be spiteful. I didn't go out of resentment. And I didn't go for any reason other than just to be respectful. So I drive up to Burlingame to the church service that she never would have wanted, that my sister wanted. And the priest said, does anybody want to talk? And my hand shot up. And I used to think for years, because I'm a human, I used to think, when she dies, I'm going to tell the world all the terrible things she did to me. And that's not why my hand shot up. My hand shot up because I had no idea. I didn't have any idea I was going to get a chance to talk. I got up on the altar and I almost said, my name is Jules and I am an alcoholic. I didn't. What I said was, my name is Jules. I'll never forget it. It just came out. It wasn't me. It wasn't scripted. I said, my name is Jules and I am an alcoholic. Oh, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. I said, my name is Jules. I'm Martha's youngest daughter. It's unfortunate that we didn't get to see each other in the last years of her life. But she made a decision and I made a decision, and I don't regret my decision. I feel so badly that she was in such pain at the end of her life. I hope she's not anymore. I hope she's with my grandma and grandpa. I hope she's happy. I hope she's at peace. I often told her, and this is the truth, I often told her how much I appreciated how hard it must have been to raise my sister and myself with no husband, with no financial support. She was 20 and she was angry, and that's why she tried to kill me. But I had no clue when I was a kid. You know, you don't get that. You don't understand that. But I didn't say that part. That was my little parentheses. But at the church, I said, you know, I often told her how much I valued all the effort she put in, and that I often told her how she was a good mother and that I was a good daughter and I loved her. And I sat down. And that was the grace and dignity that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. That was not me, because the old me would have told them all the terrible things she did. But I didn't live there anymore. And one of the reasons why is because I learned I gave her enough of my life. I will not give any more of my life to things that do not serve me. And that's how I live my life today. Every day, I just try to be a better human being. I just try to learn something new. I try to practice kindness and compassion. Some of the folks here, they tease me about my positivity. And one of the reasons is because that's where I come from. It's darkness and despair and no hope. And I'm never going back to that. So if there's anyone that struggles with anything, you can get past anything. It takes some work. It takes repetition. It takes perseverance. It takes spilling the secret. It takes trusting the process. It takes work. but it's so much easier than living the way I used to live. I have used the steps to overcome. Shocker, at 20 years sober, I like to gamble. What? I had to face that. Shocker, I use food to quell feelings. I had to face that. I used the steps to get past gambling, food, him, money, my mom, the job. I mean, this program is perfection. When I first got sober, I thought it was nirvana. I live in reality today, but I still see the nirvana possibilities of the program. And I'm so grateful that I have been so supportive and so blessed with you guys seeing my value when I couldn't. I'm going to end with this. I have 9 minutes, but I'm going to end. I was still troubled with my mom in my head around, I don't know, 20, before she died. And I was at another retreat. It was by Monterey, California. You may have heard of it. It's a beautiful area on our little coast. And I went to this beach and I was watching these puppies and these children play on the beach. And I love the ocean. And I couldn't get my mom out of my head. And it hit me. You guys had told me for years that I was a child of God and that I had value, that I was worth something. And even though I gained value from Ireland and from not giving my body to someone or not spending money or not eating or gambling, whatever, I'd learned so many things, I still had the voice creep in, the disease voice creep in. But I watched these puppies and children playing, and I went up to this man who was throwing a ball for this little puppy, wriggly little butt covered with sand and slobber. And I said, "May I pet your dog?" And he said, "Oh, sure, but she's not going to want to let you pet her." And I waited and I watched, and she came up to me and I said, "What's her name?" And he said, "Shazam." And it hit me that God wanted me to be exactly like that Shazam. And that's how I try to live my life every single day today. I don't do it perfect. You guys have seen me in listening to the disease voice every now and then, sharing my secrets one-on-one with you, holding me up, encouraging me, reminding me of who I am. I'm a warrior. I have value. I give value and I expect to be treated with value. I'm so grateful to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. As long as I don't drink, one day at a time, I have a chance. I never had a chance before in my life, and I'm not letting go of this one. Thank you, Sarah, so much for letting me share. I hope I provided some hope and strength and laughter for someone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jules, so much.